You are now listening to the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. Here is your host, Blaine Spencer.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. You know who I am. I'm your host, Blaine Spencer. It's been a pleasure always bringing you guys as much information, my hot takes, to the internet or as well as to this podcast world. Today, I have a special guest. We've had Justin from #ThisJustin. Today, I have Marsha, the other co-host, part of This Just In. Marsha, thank you so much for taking your time out of your evening to come on and talk Final Whistle with me and talk some Olympics.
Thank you so much, Blaine, for having me. Hopefully, I know Justin would have set the bar really high, so hopefully I can live up to the expectations.
Yeah, Justin.
So we have
it's
Marsha
down
from
here.
This Just
Yeah,
In.
go
Marsha,
for it.
why don't you just go in and elaborate on the This Just In sports show, as well as what brought you into starting it, being a co-host, etc.
Well, Blaine, I am a former sports reporter here in Barbados. So that's how Justin and I met. He was also a sports reporter. So from being professional colleagues, we became friends. And then during the COVID, well, he's always had this vision to have a sports show. And then during the pandemic last year, everybody was home most of the time, working from home, etc. So it seemed like the perfect time to start. And without the limitations of, okay, now we need a studio. Now, you didn't need any of that in this virtual environment that had become commonplace. So it was his vision and we just decided to run with it. For me personally, I'm an avid sports fan. As I said, a former sports reporter. My background is in media and communications. And more recently, I've been interested in sports management and administration. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. And I know I was talking to Justin a little earlier today, and he was saying that you had been following the Olympics to a T. Is that right?
Yes,
Pretty significantly?
yes. Pretty significantly, because in my day job, I'm a research officer at a media company. So part of my job during the Olympics was literally to log everything we had recorded. So it almost felt like I watched the entire Olympics for the duration of the 2.5 weeks or so.
That's fantastic. So that's what this show's going to focus on today. I want to get your takes on the Olympics, as well as some different things that we discussed off the air. But first off, I want to get your overall take. Did the IOC make the correct decision? I know they postponed it from 2020 to 2021, still called it Tokyo 2020. But was it the correct decision to move forward, especially with COVID casings rising right at the beginning before they got started?
For me, it's difficult to say whether it was the right or wrong decision. And more often than not, these things look right or wrong in retrospect. You know how they say hindsight is 2020. So I think they made the best possible decision, taking all the various stakeholders into consideration, given the information we had at present. Was it the best decision? Honestly, from an organizational perspective, or in terms of the impact on the Japanese healthcare, the pandemic, their managing of the pandemic, etc. We probably won't fully know the impact, if negative or positive, that the Olympics did have on their handling of the situation, whether medical resources were diverted and so forth. But if we then take the other stakeholders into consideration, when you look at the billions of dollars the Japanese, through the organizing committee, would have already spent, the money the IOC would have invested, when you think about the corporate sponsors, partners, TV rights, NBC alone has multiple billion-dollar deal. So much money was at stake that an outright cancellation would have been a logistical nightmare, a legal nightmare. So once you decided that, okay, cancellation is absolutely not an option, you just had to find a way to make it work in the best possible, or in the safest way possible. And that's why you saw, the different implementation of the various playbooks. You had a playbook for athletes, playbook for the media, guidelines for each category, daily COVID testing. Then the Japanese authorities made the decisions not to have spectators at the venues. So everything was put in place to have the games as safe as possible once cancellation wasn't on the table. So for me, I think ultimately it might have turned out to be the best decision for those involved, even for the athletes, because then, as we saw, based on their performances, the athletes really wanted to compete.
Absolutely. And for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag, like how you were describing it as, especially with it being postponed in 2020, which was almost inevitable because we had no clue what was happening at that time with the virus. But it kind of hurts for those athletes that would have qualified then, because some of them didn't qualify for the 2021 version because of potential injuries or not having their peak performances when it counted most. So if they were going to postpone it again, then you're looking at having a summer and winter within a 4-month time period. And
it is also a World Cup year. So the calendar itself would have been crazy.
In Qatar, exactly. There was going to be no chance of being able to fit everything in. So the best decision was to move on. They did have the protocols in place. I think the alternates was actually a very good idea that they added in, was having alternates.
Yeah.
Especially, I know you had to forfeit if you tested positive while you're in the middle, but if you tested positive before the event, giving another athlete an opportunity,
a chance,
was a great idea to be implemented. So I think it was, again, it's a mixed bag. There was going to be no correct answer. There was going to be no wrong answer here. But it's going to be really
there's some athletes who benefited from the cancellation because they were hurt, late 2019 into 2020. So on either side, it could go either way. Yeah.
You're pulling strings. So for you, Marcia, then, do you deem it a success? Because I think a lot of these protocols will probably be implemented again in 2022, because the virus isn't going away anytime soon. They might bring in fans, but do you deem it a success this summer?
I think so. Given everything that was happening, given the time in which we were operating in the middle of a pandemic, and the Japanese population themselves dealing with what was happening, I think the games was a success because, none of the events had to be canceled. None of the individual disciplines had to be canceled. There was no major COVID outbreak that we know of in the athlete village or so forth. You had, a couple high profile names along the way. For example, Coco Gauff testing positive before she left for Japan. And then Sam Kendricks, the American pole vaulter, testing positive in the village. That one was probably the one that caused a little bit of scare. Everybody was on lockdown for a little bit.
Jon Rahm, the top golfer in the world, tested positive right beforehand too.
Exactly. So you had some scares, but generally, because I know some people had concerns of this massive outbreak that would have swept through the Olympic Village and everything would have to be shut down, etc. So we didn't have that. Everything went off, let's say from a television viewing perspective, because obviously I wasn't there on the ground, as seamlessly as it possibly could have. And then on top of that, the performances of the athletes were really good, if not better than expected, when you consider, the number of world records being broken across several disciplines: athletics, swimming, weightlifting, cycling. So you saw that athletes were performing at their peak level. None of the competitions had to be canceled. There were no major outbreaks, no major issues like that. So from that perspective, I would have to say it was successful.
I agree with the world records, especially, and with no fans. You had to bring in your own energy.
Yeah.
And I know some of especially like track or swimming, you have the competitors in the pool or on the track with you, which kind of makes that a little bit less seamless, but not having that crowd noise. Still, you got to create that own energy. A lot of the time, the energy was brought by their teammates that were going to the finals, because they were the only ones really allowed to be in the facility. And again,
go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, from a TV viewing perspective too, once things got going, you didn't really notice or miss, there were no spectators there that much. The action on the field, the action at the various events was that good that it captured your attention, it kept you locked in, and it didn't feel as if, like, for example, when European football restarted last year, you felt the sense of, these venues are empty, it's flat. But to me, you didn't get that vibe from the Olympics, especially track and field, which I probably watched the most of. If anything, what you found is you heard a bit more of the athletes than you normally would in terms of when they were speaking to themselves or when they would scream out and stuff like that. You got more of that side of things. But from a television viewing perspective, I don't think I miss the spectators that much.
Couldn't agree more. And especially with you talked about the soccer when it restarted. You could hear the coaches telling them what to do.
Yeah.
They could actually do what they're being told instead of like when they restarted this past weekend, they're back to the normal, just saying, holding their ear. I can't hear you. But more than anything, you can't say that. I know I was reading this article that released a couple days ago with the Wall Street Journal. I know it's going to be a significant financial hit that Japan's going to take, that it costed roughly $15 billion for this Olympics to take place there in the country of Japan. And they're not going to get that revenue back that you would normally get from fans or for vendors, from sponsors, etc. But that was going to be inevitable. And but that, other than that, the athletes delivered, and that's all you can ask for. And even the announcers that were there on site, the reporters there on site, they did a phenomenal job as well.
And even as you mentioned, the athletes, you know, in a lot of the post-event interviews, especially for the medalists, you heard how much it meant to them to be able to compete. People were reduced to tears. They said, you know, this was a really hard year. So to be able to come here and perform meant so much. I mean, you see, it almost felt as if we were seeing even more passion and more emotion being openly displayed than we normally would. So even from that perspective, for some athletes, just being able to compete and get through their event would have been deemed a success on an individual level, and it added to the overall success of the event.
And it added in another layer of mental toughness for these athletes. I know there was some backlash towards Simone Biles, which was completely unwarranted in my opinion, because of her getting there, and then she got the flipsies, and it took a turn. She ended up pulling out of 75% of her events.
Yeah.
But I that was how this year and a half has gone now, that it's all about that mental toughness and trying to will yourself to get to that point. Because every dream of an athlete is to be there in that 4-year time period. This year it was 5 from 2016. And it was just showed so much encouragement to see that they were able to endure so much in these last couple of years to get here.
Because even something as simple as extending your training program for an additional year, that can wreak havoc on your body. Because if you're training on cycles and you're preparing for a 4-year cycle, and now you have a whole other year extension, depending on the event that you're doing, that's really, really tough. So to be able to still come out there and deliver, and as you mentioned with Simone Biles, etc., for me, it's also important to know that, making the right decision, even though the highest is at stake, that Olympic gold medal. To me, she made the best decision personally, as well as for her team during that team competition. Because had she fallen off an apparatus or something like that, it would have been even worse for the team scores. So from a team perspective and a personal perspective, with her safety, her health, everything in mind, for me, it was the right decision.
Without question. So let's transition. You said you've pretty much covered it from start to finish. What was your favorite moment that you took away from the Olympics? And was there a moment that you were actually disappointed in by like an athlete or a team in any of the events?
Do I have to pick just one moment?
Nope. Because hey, we got all night. You go ahead.
That's the thing. If someone asks me to pick just one moment, I don't think I can pick. For me, especially, even if I just focus on track and field solely, there were so many memorable moments in track and field.
Mine's going to be track and field, so
I can't just pick one. So, for example, Elaine Thompson-Herah being the first woman to pull off that double-double, as we're now calling it, being able to defend Olympic titles in the 100 and 200, and not only defend them, but a 10:61, breaking the Olympic record in the 100, 21 point breaking the national record in the 200 for Jamaica, and then winning gold in the 4x1, and Jamaica's women sweeping that 100 meters for the second time, because they did it in 2008. We're able to do it again from a Caribbean perspective, because I am from the Caribbean. I'm from Barbados. That was remarkable to see. And interestingly for me, the females really turned up and showed out this Olympic Games. Like, some of the best performances came from females. So we had Sifan Hassan doing a mind-boggling triple that I even
And
to
she
think
podiumed
about
in
it,
all of them. She
and
podiumed.
podium in all of them, falling in one of the qualifying races and having a final later that same day. Like, her performances were mind-boggling. Coming away with 2 gold medals out of the 3, and she said she's going after that 5,000 world record at the next Diamond League. So superhuman, if we can call it that. Another feel-good moment for me was the men's high jump with Mutaz Essa Barshim and Gianmarco Tamberi, and them deciding to share the gold medal. And you just saw the emotion and the relief that Tamberi felt, having missed Rio with a broken foot, etc. So for me, that, every Olympics, you tend to have a feel-good moment. So when Barshim says, can we share it? And the judge is like, well, I guess you can. And Tamberi just, he totally erupts and is very ecstatic. For me, that was very, very memorable. Not because I like Barshim. Barshim is my favorite high jumper outside of Javier Sotomayor. So just to know that what they went through, and for them to come back both of them come back from injury and so forth, and sharing a gold medal. You saw some people saying, but that's not fair. I mean, it's about, you have to have a winner. Like, no, you don't have to have a winner. The rules allow for certain field events, if they can't be broken, the participants have the option to do a jump off. And if they don't want to do a jump off, the medal can be shared. So for me, that was a really memorable moment. World records by Karsten Wahlholm in that 400-meter hurdles.
That's mine.
Time, that's yours? But I'll let you take it from here. Why was that one for you?
So I actually was a hurdler when I used to run track, and it wasn't the 400 hurdles yet. It was still 300s, and then you worked your way up to the 4. But on the men's and women's side, just those were the 2 races that pretty much everybody had wanted to see. It was leading up. Karsten Warholm had already broken the world record on home soil going in, and when he broke it in Oslo, and you knew Rai Benjamin was going to bring it. He was going to be right there. And then what Sydney McLaughlin and Dalila Muhammad did was another sensational thing. And you can actually go to the 3rd place finishers as well. Alison Dos Santos and Bull from the Netherlands.
Yes.
All had
under the old,
fastest 3 times ever at the Olympics were run by those 3, the top 3 finishers in the 400 hurdle race. It's just absolutely absurd. And it's just going to be a rivalry that's going to continue. I know on the women's side, Muhammad is starting to round out her career. So we most likely will not see her again in 2026. But from what Sydney McLaughlin did as a motivator, she ripped everything up. She completely rebuilt herself after losing to Muhammad in the Worlds.
The Worlds, 2019.
Exactly, in 2019. And teaching herself to jump off of both legs, have that composure that even if you're going to misstep, that you're going to be able to be comfortable over the hurdle. And then on the men's side, Karsten Warholm just is a man amongst boys.
Because I think I saw a stat that his time would have placed him, like he would have, there were 18 men slower than him in the flat 400.
I know.
Had he entered that event. Like 45.94 is a flat 4 time for some people. And you're running that with 10 barriers.
Break this 47-second barrier, and Warholm broke the 46-second barrier in that race. And I think it would have been tighter if Benjamin didn't clip that final hurdle. If you rewatch it, he clips the final one, which kind of deviates momentum, which allows more Warholm to pull away in that last couple meters. But just the 400 hurdles for me. And then I will give a disappointment. United States of America 4x1. Are you kidding me? 6th place, and you're complaining about who should be getting the baton when. And
For me, I guess
I mean, for me,
it's almost
I watched it live. I was just so frustrated. Like, how could you be like, the exchanges were the second exchange was awful. It didn't even look like they practiced in that second exchange. It looked like they just went out there and said, all right, who's running where, and you're gonna go. Like, that's how bad the second exchange was. And you could see that's the issue with the United States a lot in the relays, because they're all complaining to be on that team. And the team that won that heat, China, they have 4 or 5 guys that are going to be running. That's it. They practice it the whole year. Like, this is like, that's their moment. So.
And that's the thing about the relays that people need to remember. You don't need the 4 fastest guys. You don't need 4 9-point guys. If you have, let's say, 4 10 flat, 10-1 guys that can have a clean exchange, you're in a better position than just sticking 4 fast men in the race and hoping the stick gets around. Like, for us, unfortunately, is a running joke to see if the US men will even be eligible for the final, because, recent memory, there's been baton drops, etc. And like, what made it worse, I guess, was, NBC did that whole spiel with Kevin Hart, this big bill up, like, Bolt is finally gone. So now we can win.
The curse of the 4x1.
Definitely
the curse
so.
for the United States 4x1.
Unfortunately.
Most definitely.
It was a good gold medal for Italy.
Italy surprised everybody. In this, they won the open one, 4x1, high jump, as you mentioned. Just like, Italy showed up on the track, which was extremely good for them. And then, more than anything, it was just trying to deviate different things. So now I want to go, what was that one sport that you never probably watch ever, but you couldn't miss it in the Olympics this year?
Well, one sport that I had, for me, it's twofold. One sport that I had never watched, but I watched during the Olympics, was sport climbing, because we don't have that here. We don't do that here in Barbados. So it was intriguing to see that sport climbing, one, was an Olympic event, because I didn't realize it was that big a sport globally. And then secondly, the speed at which people were going up those walls was absolutely, it's one of those things. Like, I saw a tweet about, the 100 meters at the Olympics is no longer the fastest event. No, it is the sport climbing. I'm like, okay, cool. So that was intriguing. But a sport that I generally don't get to watch outside of the Olympics, I always make sure I watch artistic swimming, formerly synchronized swimming. For me, the athleticism, the technique, the choreography, what they're able to do underwater, holding their breath while being in sync, the core strength, the upper, for me, it is phenomenal when you watch what these ladies do underwater. I mean, most people don't even swim well. For you to be doing a full-on acrobatic dance routine, so it's almost like swimming, gymnastics, ballet, everything wrapped up, diving, all in one. It's that artistic swimming for me. It's beautiful to watch. And then when you separate apart from it being beautiful, when you think about the physicality, the breath control, the lung capacity, and so forth that is required to be the best in this sport, for me, is amazing. For you?
Oh, for me, I couldn't actually not turn off my TV to watch the diving. Like,
yes,
I was just, I know China destroys every time, but it was just insane what they were doing. It's just like, they were just on a completely different level of competition, because it was literally, usually, especially in individuals, it was literally them against each other to try and win gold. Like, they had separated from the rest of the field for the bronze. Like, there was no doubt who was going to be gold or silver. It was everybody else just playing for third, which was absolutely ridiculous to me. And like, their rotations, their radius, their control of their body, their the ineptive water,
and then the entry into the water.
Yes, insane. Like, no splash. It was just like, I was mesmerized. I couldn't stop watching it. especially when
Yeah.
the Chinese were up doing it.
Yeah, I like both the individual diving as well as the duets, the synchronized diving. So yeah, especially I was glad to see Team Great Britain, they really stepped up in the synchronized version because I think they won gold in that particular
Yeah.
one. But
I think that was
seeing
the only
people,
event China lost in diving.
yes, and so you have to not only control your body but be absolutely in sync with your partner. That's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other one I kind of watched for a little while. I mean, it was the speed walking actually. Because I was like, I
That
could
draws you
totally
in.
do this. I could totally get my hips moving, get my body going. I was like, I could totally represent the United States in like 4 years. I couldn't.
I think the speed
That was the
for
only
them.
thing. And I was like, wait a minute, that's like my jogging pace or what?
Exactly. I was just about to say that the speed they walk at is a lot of people jogging pace. It's crazy. And then not only you can't only walk fast, there's that technique where part of your foot must be on the ground at all times.
I know, and
So
they'll come up and card you, if you're not doing it in the correct
so mentally
motion.
you still have to be dialed in and going as fast as you can.
I know it was like, I know they went for a while, but like I watched for like a good like half hour of it, and I was just like, I can't. You sure I can't do this? You sure? I'm pretty sure I could pull it off. It's all good. But for Marsha, I want to thank you so much for taking your time, giving me a little bit of an Olympic breakdown and recap with me. It was truly a pleasure. Hopefully we can do this again soon. Thank you so much.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Blaine. And I'll be back. We have World Championships next year, so you never know.
Absolutely. We'll definitely do a winter one too, a winter 2022 kind of thing when it comes up to it. But everybody, that was the Final Whistle Sports Podcast. Be sure to check us out. We got more content coming out and the rest of the week. Have a good day.